In Africa, a black state prepares for independence. But this time there's a difference. For this state's not being freed from the traditional form of colonial rule. It's the Transkei, actually part of South Africa, and the first of the Bantu homelands to achieve independence under the terms of South Africa's policy of separate racial development. Just how real that independence will be is a question on which South African views differ from the rest of the world's. The Transkei is an area the size of Switzerland, bordering Lesotho. It's the traditional region of the Xhosa tribe and the first of 8 similar homelands which South Africa plans to bring to independence in the future. Umtata, the Transkei capital, is a town of 25,000 and still retains much of its quiet provincial atmosphere. But things are beginning to change. The main evidence that this will be a capital city is the new government administration building, which towers 12 stories over the rest of the town. Though there doesn't seem much likelihood that it'll be finished in time for Independence Day, some government departments are already working on the lower floors, while builders complete the remainder. When the work's finished, it's estimated it'll have cost almost 14 million rand. The name of the building's to be that of Paramount Chief Botha Sikau, the man tipped as the Transkei's first president. Outside Umtata, this will be the president's palace. Attached, the official residences of the Prime Minister and 4 top members of his cabinet. But the red brick palace won't be ready before next summer. A new airport to serve Umtata's being completed at a cost of 10 million rand, but there are doubts it too will be operational by independence. Though the 2-kilometer runway is designed with jets in mind, it still isn't properly clear. A temporary sports stadium's been erected at a cost of 300,000 rand, especially for the celebrations on October 26th. It will seat 25,000 with standing room for 10,000 more, and later the area will become the site for a new parliament building. A great tent city to house 12,000 sportsmen and tribal dancers who'll perform during Independence Week. 1,200 tents have been erected and there'll be free food and beer. Some 300,000 blacks are expected to converge on Umtata for the festivities from all parts of the Transkei, many transported free by the government. The Transkei is a showcase for South Africa's policy of apartheid. Until now, the segregation of races here has been as strictly enforced as anywhere else in the Republic. But after October 26th, the signs will come down because the leaders in the Transkei argue that while they'll take their independence from South Africa, they won't run their nation in line with apartheid policy. The Transkei will become a non-racial state, with whites and blacks having the same rights, as long as they satisfy the requirements for Transkei citizenship. In the middle of the controversy over Transkei's independence are some 10,000 whites and 1.75 million blacks. Are they ready for independence? And anyway, what kind of independence will it be? Of all the homelands, or Bantustans, South Africa chose to give Transkei independence first because it's the one with the most developed political structure. The Transkei was granted self-government in 1963, when the people elected their first parliament, or bunga. Until now, there have been 109 seats, with 45 elected at the polls and 64 filled by chiefs appointed by the South African government. After independence, half the seats in Parliament will go to elected members and half to tribal chiefs. members who traditionally support the party of the man who's led the Transkei through negotiations with South Africa to the point of independence. That man is Paramount Chief Kaiser Matanzima. 61 years old and a former attorney, Matanzima's been Transkei's chief minister since 1963. His supporters proclaim he's an architect of freedom. His critics decry him as a puppet of Pretoria, ushering in a stooge government and selling out his people. Matanzima believes it's right to accept independence on South Africa's terms, but he maintains his policies will remain his own. The country's pre-independence elections ensured Matanzima would have the political power to govern in his own way. There was never any doubt which way the lorry loads of voters would poll. Matanzima has a strong following, and before nomination day, he loaded the dice even more in his favor by jailing 4 of the opposition's leaders. Opposition parties were in fact able to field candidates in less than half the 75 seats contested, and in these seats, Matanzima's men were elected unopposed. But Mr. Knowledge Guzana of the New Democratic Party did his best to campaign from his prison cell. The publicity that attentions aroused has done little to win over critics of Transkei's independence.
In a year's time, the Transkei is going to be an independent nation.
But despite all the criticisms, Chief Matanzima remains unruffled. This is what he had to say at the end of last year when we asked him whether the Transkei would be truly sovereign.
I'm certain that we shall be able to convince the Transkei that it is a real sovereign state when it becomes independent in October 1976.
What about the outside world? Are you going
Even
to be able
the
to convince
outside
them?
world will be convinced. It is our constitution that will speak for us.
Yes. You're going to apply for United Nations membership and membership of the Organization for African Unity.
We'll certainly apply for the membership of the United Nations organization. And in our application, we shall present our constitution, which will reflect the true position about our sovereignty. The Transkei is about 18,000 square miles in extent, and certainly larger than many of the members of the United Nations organization. Small countries have recently been accorded recognition. If countries such as Malawi, Zambia, that were part of the Rhodesians, could be allowed to be members of the United Nations organizations when they broke off and sought their own independence. Why couldn't we? The Transkei was a colony of Great Britain, and it was not our liking that it became part of the Union of South Africa in 1910. We never consulted about it. If we had our choice, we should have been independent during the year 1910.
In the charged atmosphere of the United Nations, it looks very much to some of them there, and they're confident that they are going to reject your membership application.
If that is the case, it will be unfortunate. And if we are not accepted, we shall be in the position of Switzerland. It will be nothing new. And in any event, it will not stop our independence at all. We are going to be independent once and for all.
In fact, since then, both the UN and the OAU have decided not to recognize an independent Transkei. Even so, Matanzima claims that countries will gradually come to accept his nation after independence when his government's political record will have spoken for itself. The Transkei's economic dependence on South Africa is irrefutable, and though Matanzima argues that his country is economically more viable than many other African states, he'll still need the support of foreign investors. Over 97% of the country's population lives like this, far outside the towns and the cash economy. But this is where the Transkei's potential wealth lies. The soil is good, and if methods can be modernized, yields may be increased tenfold. In fact, South Africa has invested heavily in farming and processing, to the tune of 45 million rand between 1971 and 75. It's not a purely philanthropic policy by Pretoria, for they hope the Transkei will become a valuable producer of crops and textiles for consumption in South Africa. The most difficult stumbling block to a booming agricultural economy is the traditional outlook of the population. There are too many scraping a bare living off the land and too few farming it for profit. One promising agricultural development is tea growing. It's a labour-intensive crop, helping to reduce the overwhelming majority of unemployed Transkeians who live at subsistence level. The tea finds a ready market in South Africa, which hopes to get half its total supply from here in future. But the most significant crop is Phormium tenax, a tough, leafy plant yielding a fibre similar to sisal or jute and used for making sacking and bags. For this crop too, South Africa will be a hungry market on the Transkei's doorstep. But the country is also hoping to be able to export the fibre, either through East London or from a future port which may have to be established on the Transkei's own coast. The fibre's not only grown here, but also processed, the beginnings of an agricultural-based light industry. In the last decade, many other factories have sprung up as South Africa has tried to develop some kind of industrial base. Funds for all these projects have come from the Transkei Development Corporation. Set up by Pretoria more than 10 years ago, the agency also buys out businesses and factories from whites and resells them to blacks on terms they can afford. Millions of rand have gone into these projects, but critics of the new state say this just proves how completely dependent the Transkei will be on South African aid. How did Chief Matanzima react to the charges that this would seriously limit his political freedom?
Well, there are so many countries in the southern states of Africa that are economically dependent on the Union of South Africa or the Republic of South Africa. Lesotho, for example, is dependent on the Republic of South Africa, and so is Swaziland, and so is Botswana, and so is Malawi, and many other countries in southern Africa. We shall not be the first country to be dependent on the Republic of South Africa.
Do you mind being dependent upon them? I mean, do you feel that your own policies and so on fit in with Pretoria's?
Not at all. Our policies will not certainly align themselves with Pretoria.
How are you going to differ with them? How are you going
We
to
are
make
going
that
to have a
difference?
non-racial state in the Transkei, all people equal without any discrimination whatsoever.
But can the country's no discrimination pledge be fulfilled? The Transkei's white population has been divided on the subject since the independence plans were announced. Just how comfortable will life be for the 10,000 whites who still remain in the country? Over the years, many haven't waited to find out. They've sold their businesses to the Transkei Development Corporation and moved back to South Africa rather than take a chance in a black-ruled country. Mr. Sparg was one of them. Others are more optimistic, like Barry McGar, for example, who runs a furniture store in Umtata.
Continue doing business? Do you feel confidence in the future economy of the country?
Well, I've got a lot of money invested in the Transkei here, and well, if I didn't feel confident, I wouldn't be staying. No, I'm very confident.
And you will definitely be staying after independence?
Yes, yes.
The Umtata Cafe has been doing brisk business in the capital since Mrs. Pumeliotis and her husband came from Greece and took it over 7 years ago. The Transkei has been good to them. Their standard of living is relatively high, and they intend to remain in the Bantustan after independence. The changeover, economically at least, has gone smoothly so far. While the Transkei Development Corporation has been selling formerly white-owned businesses to blacks, so blacks have been trained to run the shops and businesses for themselves. In banking, in insurance, and in the new nation's civil service, blacks have been trained to take over jobs which were formerly filled by whites. One native Transkeian who's already made good is the owner of Laura's Boutique. The shop, one of the best known in Umtata, belongs to Maxwell Mapalwi, a former civil servant and now one of the richest black businessmen in Umtata. Mr. Mapalwi owns, in addition to his shops, this petrol station, formerly the property of a European. With his wife Laura and their 4 children, Mr. Mapalwi lives in a house that, by Bantu standards at least, is opulent. The Mapalwi family also own other property around Umtata, and they're having a second, even more luxurious residence built just outside the capital. Homes like the Mapalwis were usually only attainable by the Transkei's whites. Now the ownership of similar houses is passing to the black population of the Bantustan. Blacks are also being encouraged to build their own houses, often in areas that were until now exclusively white. For many of the new occupants of houses like these, a wholly different way of life is opening up. Compare conditions like these with the traditional Xhosa village, or with the cramped housing units in black townships around South Africa's cities. Even where cheaper housing has been constructed around the new industrial centres for the Transkei, as here at Butterworth, standards are far better than blacks have been used to in the past. At the moment, less than 3% of people living in the Transkei reside in urban areas, and nearly half of all Transkei's people live and work outside their country, in and around the conurbations of South Africa. And it's the future of these expatriate Transkeians that's become a real point of difference between Chief Matanzima and the South African government. These factories aren't in the Transkei, but just over the South African border. The majority of people working in them are Transkeians, and in fact, textile factories like this simply couldn't function without labor from the newly emergent nation. Black critics claim that the Bantustans will be used as reservoirs of cheap labor, and once that labor has been exploited, they say the homelands will be used as dumping grounds for those blacks whose services the white economic system no longer requires. Mr. Forster says all Xhosas, even those living in South Africa proper, must take Transkei citizenship. But what of those who wish to remain South African subjects? Will they have a free choice? And what of those Africans who accept Transkei citizenship but who wish to work and live in South Africa? Will their position be unique? We asked Chief Matanzima.
We have made no arrangements as yet.
What would you wish for?
But it is a matter of concern as far as we are concerned.
Yes.
We won't interfere with any people who want to remain in the Republic at all.
Do you think some of them might be sent back?
If they are sent back, and there is proof that their original homes were in the Transkei, we shall accept. There will be agreements between my government and the Republican government on the people of the Transkei who are still in the Republic.
What will those agreements say?
I don't know at present.
What would you wish for?
Well, I would wish that my people continue to work in the Republic.
Just leave them there.
Yes.
Presumably the accusation is that you're abandoning them and by the policy of separate development and becoming independent yourself.
What about the Sotos in the Republic?
Yes.
And what about Botswanas in the Republic? What about Malawians in the Republic? What about Swazis in the Republic?
Yes.
Are they abandoned?
Since that interview, repeated discussions with South Africa have failed to solve the dispute. Mr. Vorster still insisting that Pretoria will decide, in effect, who is a Transkeian. If it does end up as a defeat for Chief Matanzima, he can console himself with the knowledge that the taxes paid by Mr. Vorster's Transkeians will come to his own hard-pressed economy.
You will, for the first time in the history of this country, since its cynical rape by the colonial forces, become citizens of your country with all that entails in human society. On the other hand, Black Africa and the Western countries constituting the European Economic Community allege that Transkeian independence is merely a shadow of the Republic of South African apartheid policy.
But even while Chief Matanzima spoke to rallies at the Independence Day rehearsals about the freedoms they had been denied and which now he claimed lay ahead of them, opposition party members languished in Umtata's prison.
Your country was incorporated into the Union of South Africa during the year 1910 without your approval. It is never sought in any way. You suffered the indignity of the segregation laws of the Union of South Africa.
Kaiser Matanzima faces accusations and challenges from politicians all over Black Africa. The biggest political millstone hanging round his neck is in fact Pretoria's blessing on his country's independence. The fact that he's cooperated with Mr. Vorster to such an extent is seen by some African nationalists as almost a betrayal of his people's interests. How then does he see his relationship with the South African leader?
What are your personal relationships like with that man? And two, do you think that you're absolutely confident that he's sincere in making your independence total and real?
I respect the Prime Minister of South Africa. He's a great, honest, and dedicated man. And I'm certain that his honesty will never change. He will give the Transkei complete sovereignty.
Thank you.
I have no doubt that the Prime Minister, Mr. Vorster, is the key figure to peaceful relations in Southern Africa.
There are, claim supporters of independence, good historical precedents for a national flag flying over the Transkei. It should be treated, says South Africa, in the same way as the other former British protectorates of Lesotho, Botswana and Swaziland. But those countries were recognized by the United Nations and the world. The Transkei is unlikely to be recognized outside South Africa. So this is the national anthem of a country which, in the eyes of the outside world, may never officially exist.